Looking for ways to prevent Hashimoto's thyroiditis? Hi, I'm Dr. Arland Hill, and I've got a plan to help you out. And to help you figure out how to prevent Hashimoto's thyroiditis, you have to understand what contributes to Hashimoto's thyroiditis. So let's work backwards here. So there's three things that are necessary for the development of Hashimoto's thyroiditis. And of course, Hashimoto's is an autoimmune condition, and when we talk about any autoimmune condition, there are three core criteria that are necessary for that autoimmune condition or for an autoimmune condition to be able to manifest. The first of which is that you have to have a genetic predisposition. Now, you may look at that and go, well, I can't do anything about my genetic predisposition. Well, correct, your genes are your genes. However, we now understand that our genes and our environment are very much interactive with each other. So we can do something about the environment. And specifically, one of the things we can do is support a process known as methylation. Now, methylation is driven by B12 and folate, as well as several other nutrients. But B12 and folate are typically the two that are most talked about. So when it comes down to how do you address this genetic component, the one of the three factors that can be looked at in helping prevent Hashimoto's thyroiditis, really it comes down to making sure that you have adequate B12 and folate, as well as the other nutrients that support this methylation process, to make sure that your DNA and your environment are adequately communicating with each other. That's critical. And to be able to really understand what your levels of B12 and folate, as well as other nutrients that come into this process are, you really want to look at having a micronutrient assessment to get an adequate level or an adequate measurement of what your specific needs are, so these nutrients can stay in balance. So number one is your DNA and how it interacts with the environment. So you want to make sure that that is an appropriate interaction. Number two is actually the environment itself, meaning environmental triggers. So with any autoimmune condition, not just simply Hashimoto's thyroiditis, there has to be some type of environmental trigger that sets the cascade of autoimmunity moving forward. And in the case of Hashimoto's thyroiditis, there are some specific things that have been targeted and associated to promote Hashimoto's thyroiditis or to promote it progressing. One of the big ones, one of the big environmental cues has been the presence of gluten, and specifically the wheat gluten, gliadin, in the diet. Now, if you are concerned about Hashimoto's thyroiditis, absolutely one of the best things that you can do is avoid gluten in your diet, given that there's such a strong connection in it predisposing to this particular inflammatory process in the thyroid. Now, I'll add to that you should also be thinking, in regards to an environmental trigger, you should also be thinking about glyphosate as a potential causative factor here as well, because we know that cases of thyroid dysfunction have increased as the chemical glyphosate, you may also know it as Roundup, the herbicide pesticide, as the use of that has gone up in the agricultural industry and we find it more in grains, we're also seeing that there's an increase in thyroid dysfunction, of course, Hashimoto's thyroiditis being a component or one of the subsets of that. So the second thing that you have to know is, what are your environmental triggers? Now, you may have some other unique environmental triggers that play a role here outside of just gluten or glyphosate, aka Roundup there. You may also be looking at some other foods that are causing problems there. There may also be some chemicals, some other chemicals you're exposed to, some molds that could be playing a role here, some different microorganisms. So there's other environmental triggers. Now, the third one that you have to think about here is going to be the gut. Gut dysbiosis is a big concern, and essentially what gut dysbiosis means is that if you take the gut and you think about the different types of organisms that you have in there, you have some organisms that are generally, it's not uncommon to find them in there. They just shouldn't be found in excessive levels, and when these organisms start going above their thresholds, when they start becoming overly prevalent, they start going into an overgrowth type of situation, we often call that dysbiosis, so just abnormal growth of these different bacteria. So we want to keep that balance in check. And the way that we keep that balance in check is making the right dietary choices and making sure that our diet has a lot of fiber, has a lot of color in it. Those are going to be things that are going to, from a dietary standpoint, that are going to help bring that balance back. But as it relates to a way that you can help prevent Hashimoto's thyroiditis, the more balanced you can keep the bacteria in the gut, the less likelihood you're going to have of developing that. Now, there's some great ways that you can go about assessing that. So you may be asking yourself, well, do I have this balance or do I not have this balance? And the way that you would know whether or not you have this balance is to do a DNA-based assessment of your stool, so you can actually get a definitive picture of what the landscape in your gut looks like, so you'll know exactly what kind of action to take. So let's recap these three again. Number one is going to be your DNA and how your DNA interacts with the environment. Number two are going to be environmental triggers, so specifically different things that you're exposed to in your environment that may seem completely harmless, but that are actually causing you a problem. And number three is going to be a imbalanced state of bacteria in your gastrointestinal tract. If you address all three of these things, you can prevent Hashimoto's thyroiditis as well as other autoimmune types of conditions. Now, if you like the information I've shared with you here, let other people know about it. Put it out there so others can find out about this. Give me a like down below if you enjoyed what I had to share. And I'm going to be bringing you more information just like this in the future. Thanks for listening, guys. I'm Dr. Arland Hill.